Grief does not ask if you are ready. It just arrives. And when it does, it changes everything. The way a room feels, the way mornings hit, the weight in your chest before you are even fully awake, the way you reach for your phone to tell someone something and then remember, everyone around you says the same things. Give it time. Stay strong. They would want you to be happy. These words are kind, but they run out, because nobody tells you the truth about grief. Nobody says the hard things. The things that actually help once you are deep inside it, and the soft words are long since gone. This video is those things. 9 truths. Not comfortable, not soft, real. The kind that most people only discover after years of carrying grief the hardest possible way. These will not end your grief. Nothing said anywhere ends grief, but they will change your relationship with it. They will show you that you do not have to wait for the grief to finish before you start finding your way back to yourself. You do not have to wait. If you are somewhere in the middle of a loss that changed everything, comment below, "I am finding my way back." Truth 1. There is no timeline. The pressure to be over it is not care. It is other people's discomfort with your pain. Someone told you that you should be moving forward by now. Maybe they said it directly. Maybe they just stopped asking how you are. Maybe they changed the subject when you brought it up. Either way, the message came through. You have been in this too long. You need to get back to normal. That message was never about you. It was about them. Grief makes people uncomfortable. It reminds them of everything they could lose, of everything they have already lost and never fully processed. Your grief is a mirror, and most people cannot hold that mirror for long, so they put a timeline on it. 6 months, a year. By now you should be better. And when you are not, they wrap their discomfort in concern and hand it back as advice. Grief does not work on a schedule. It is not a project with a deadline. It is work. Real, exhausting, invisible work that takes as long as it takes. And the taking of that time is not weakness. It is the grief doing exactly what grief is supposed to do, adapting your whole life to a world that has been permanently changed by a real loss. That adaptation takes time. How much time depends on the depth of the love, the nature of the loss, the support around you. 100 things that no one else gets to calculate on your behalf. Seneca wrote, "Let not the eyes be dry when we have lost a friend, nor let them overflow. We may weep, but we must not wail." Seneca is not telling you to stop grieving. He is pointing at the difference between grieving and drowning. Grieving is the honest, ongoing process of adapting to what happened. Drowning is when the grief has consumed everything and nothing else can get in. Both feel similar from inside, but they are different. The question worth asking is not how long have I been grieving. It is, am I still moving? Not moving on, just moving. Any direction, any small motion toward the life that is still here waiting for you. Movement, however slow, is enough. It means the grief is working. Let it work. There is a specific exhaustion that comes from grief that nobody warns you about. It is not the tiredness from not sleeping enough, though that is part of it. It is the exhaustion of carrying a weight that is invisible to everyone around you. You can look completely functional on the surface and be absolutely flattened on the inside. That exhaustion is real. It counts. It deserves the same rest and patience you would offer someone recovering from something visible. The next time someone implies you should be further along, you do not owe them an explanation. You are where you are. That is a complete sentence. Release their timeline. Your only obligation inside grief is to stay pointed toward the life, not to arrive anywhere on anyone else's schedule. If you have been carrying grief longer than anyone around you is comfortable with, comment below, "I give myself the time I need." Truth 2. Grief does not end. You do not get over real loss. You learn to carry it differently. You have been waiting to get over this, waiting for the morning when the first thought is not the loss, waiting for the person you were before this, waiting for the grief to finish so your real life can start again. The return you are waiting for is not coming, not because you are broken, because loss that was real does not simply end. It changes. The sharp, unbearable weight of the early days becomes something different over time. Not absent, different. More like something you carry rather than something that carries you. People who lose a child do not get over it. They learn across years of difficult, quiet work to carry it alongside everything else. The love, the memory, the ordinary days. The loss is always present, but the capacity to live alongside it grows. And that growing is not betrayal. It is the grief doing its deepest work. People who lose a partner of 30 years do not reach a point where the absence stops being felt. They reach a point where the absence is not the only thing being felt, where the life they shared can be remembered with warmth, where the love still exists even though the person is gone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." Change is what grief is, not the ending of love, the changing of its form. Grief is one place the love goes, memory is another. The way you live your life because of what they gave you is another. The love is everywhere in you if you look. It does not need to stay concentrated inside the grief to remain real. Stop waiting to get over it. Start asking how to carry it better. That question has real available answers. The first question does not. The love does not need an object present to remain real. It was built across the time you shared. It changed you in ways that are permanent. When people say grief gets better over time, what they mean is this: the love becomes less about the absence of the person and more about the presence of everything they gave you. The painful memories begin to be joined by the warm ones. Their laugh, their specific habits, the things they said that were entirely them. These memories feel different from the grief. They feel more like the love itself than the loss of it. When they arrive, they are some of the most healing moments available. If you have stopped waiting to get over it and started learning to carry it differently, comment below, "I carry the love forward." Truth 3. You will feel things that frighten you. The relief, the anger, the numbness, all of it is allowed. Nobody told you about the relief, that specific feeling that arrives alongside the grief when the loss also ends something that was painful, when a long illness finally ends, when the waiting is finally over. The relief is real, and the guilt about the relief arrives immediately. The guilt says the relief proves something wrong about the love. The guilt is wrong. The relief means you are human. It means you were carrying something heavy for a long time, and the weight has shifted. Real love existed inside a real situation that also contained real difficulty. When the difficulty ended, part of you responded honestly to that. That is not a flaw. That is what happens when a person lives inside genuine complexity. Then there is the anger. Anger at the person who left for leaving. At yourself for things said or unsaid. At the people who were not there. At the universe for allowing this. The anger is loud and raw, and most people carry it alone because they were never told it was allowed. Seneca wrote, "It is not that I am brave. It is that I know what is worth grieving and what is worth bearing." The anger is allowed. It contains real information about the depth of the love and the size of the loss. Feel it. Just do not let it calcify into permanent bitterness. Anger that is felt and moved through passes. Anger that is denied comes back harder every time. And the numbness, the flat, hollow absence of feeling that sometimes replaces everything else. The numbness is the system protecting itself, taking the loss in doses rather than all at once, because all at once would be too much. The feelings are still there. They will return. The numbness is not the absence of love. It is the nervous system doing what it has to do. Give yourself permission to feel whatever is actually there. No judgment, no guilt about the feeling. Whatever grief is producing in you right now is the honest response of a person who loved something real and lost it. You are not failing at grief. You are doing all of it. That is exactly right. If you have felt things inside your grief that nobody warned you about and carried them alone, comment below. Everything I feel is allowed. Truth 4. Grief changes you. The person you were before is not coming back. What is coming has more in them than you know. You are trying to return to the person you were before the loss, before everything changed, before the life that felt solid and familiar turned into something that has the same address but feels completely different. That version of you is not coming back. Not because they were destroyed, because they were changed. Every significant experience changes the person who moves through it. Real loss is as significant as it gets. The things you care about have rearranged. Things that used to feel urgent have lost their weight. Things you used to walk past without noticing have become visible in ways they were not before. This is not only loss, it is also information. Very expensive information about what actually matters, about the capacity inside you that you did not know was there until this required it from you. A significant number of people who move through genuine loss report not only recovery, but the development of something that was not present before. A deeper appreciation for ordinary moments, clearer priorities. A personal strength they had not previously known was inside them. Epictetus wrote, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The reaction does not have to be graceful. It does not have to arrive on any schedule. But at some point the question shifts. Not just what do I do with this pain, but who do I want to be on the other side of it? That question has a real answer. Your answer. Grief changes your relationship with time. Before significant loss, time can feel almost infinite. Always later to say the things that matter. Always the next visit. Grief removes that assumption permanently. The urgent, honest awareness that the people you love will not always be here is one of the few genuinely useful things grief produces. Use it. Say the things now. Show up now. The person you are becoming through this is not lesser than who you were. They are more tested, more honest. They know things about love and loss, and what actually counts that the person who went in simply did not have access to yet. If you are beginning to see that the person coming out of this is stronger than the one who went in, comment below, "I am becoming someone stronger." Truth 5. Staying in grief can become a choice. At some point, the grief becomes the last connection. Recognizing this opens the door. This truth needs the most care in the saying. In the early period of loss, grief is not a choice. It arrives like a wave and takes everything. There is nothing to decide inside it. There is only survival. But at some point, for some people, something shifts. The grief that arrived uninvited becomes familiar. It becomes the known landscape, and in a strange, quiet way, it becomes the last available place where the person who is gone still has weight and presence. Moving through the grief begins to feel like letting them go, like the size of the ongoing pain is the last available measure of the depth of the love. So the grief stays large, not through deliberate choice, because the mind is doing what minds do when trying to hold on to something the physical world has removed. This is not a judgment. It is an honest observation worth sitting with quietly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." If you removed the grief entirely, right now, would the love still be there? Would the memory still be there? Would the person still be real in your history and in who you are? Yes, all of it. The grief is not the container for any of those things. They exist without it. The love is permanent without the grief to hold it. The memory is permanent. The grief can become quieter and everything that mattered stays. The question worth asking is this: is the grief still adapting you to a changed world, or has it now become the thing preventing you from living in it? If the first, keep going. The work is not done. If the second, that is the door, not the door to abandoning the love, the door to carrying it differently, to letting the love move out of the grief and into memory, into the way you live your life because of what they meant to you. You are not leaving them. You are taking them with you into the life that is still here and still waiting for you. If you are ready to let the grief become quieter without feeling like you are leaving them behind, comment below, "I choose to live alongside the grief." Truth 6. People will fail you. The ones you expected will disappear. The ones you did not expect will stay. Grief shows you who people actually are. Some people you believed were close to you will go quiet. They will reach out once and not follow through. They will offer the easy things and avoid the real ones. They will disappear when the grief continues past the point they are comfortable witnessing. This is usually not cruelty. It is fear. Your grief reminds people of their own losses, of their own mortality, of everything in themselves they have not yet dealt with. Many people do not have the capacity to sit inside that discomfort for long, so they pull back. That does not make the absence less painful. Being in the hardest moment of your life and finding that the people you trusted were not there is a real loss on top of the original one. You are allowed to feel it. And then there are the people who arrive, the ones you did not predict, the acquaintance who checks in week after week, the person from the edge of your world who says the right thing, the friend who does not try to fix anything but simply stays. These people are rare, and they are showing you something important about what genuine care looks like when it costs something. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who will improve you. Welcome those who you are capable of improving." Grief strips away the social performance that usually covers what relationships are really made of. When the performance is gone, what is left is the truth. Some of it is smaller than you thought. Some of it is larger than you knew. Try not to let bitterness about who left consume the space that belongs to gratitude for who stayed. The people who stayed are worth more of you. Let them know it. Not formally, just the honest acknowledgement that during the hardest period of your life, they were actually there. That kind of care deserves to be named, and the relationship that produced it deserves the deeper investment it has earned. If someone showed up for you during your hardest season and you will never forget it, comment below, "I invest in the ones who stayed." Truth 7. Joy is not betrayal. Laughing again does not mean you forgot. You are allowed to be fully alive again. The first time you laugh after a real loss, the guilt arrives with the laugh. Not after, at the same moment. The laugh because something was genuinely funny. The guilt because it felt like a betrayal, like forgetting, like evidence that the grief was not serious enough or the love not deep enough. The laugh was not betrayal. It was you being alive. And being alive is the only tribute available to you now that is actually worthy of the person you lost. The guilt operates on a false belief that the intensity of ongoing suffering is the measure of the depth of love. That belief is wrong. The depth of love is measured by what it produced in the life you shared, by what it gave you, by what it changed in you. The suffering after the loss is not a measure of the love. It is a measure of the loss. Those are different things. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." The privilege is not suspended by grief. It is complicated by it, more bittersweet, more conscious, but not removed. The capacity for joy is still present even in seasons when reaching it takes more effort than it used to. When the joy returns, let it in. The joy and the grief are not enemies. They coexist in the same life. The joy does not erase the love. The love is what makes the joy feel different now, more layered, more appreciated. The specific appreciation that belongs to someone who knows what it is to have had something real and lost it. You are allowed to have good days, allowed to laugh out loud, allowed to find things beautiful again. Living fully is not forgetting. The person you lost most likely wanted you to have a good life after them. Living it fully is not leaving them behind. It is what love looks like when it keeps going. If you are finally giving yourself permission to have good days without guilt, comment below, "I am allowed to feel joy again." Truth. 8. The grief will come back. A song, a smell, a date. It returns. This is not regression. There will be weeks when the grief feels manageable, when the weight has become something you can function alongside, when mornings are mostly just mornings, when the life is mostly just life again, and you begin to think, maybe I am through the worst of it, and then something happens. A song, a date on the calendar, the smell of something that takes you straight back, a phrase the person used arriving in a completely unrelated conversation, and the grief comes back with a force that seems out of proportion to how much progress you thought you had made. This is not regression. This is not evidencing the healing was an illusion. This is the completely normal behavior of grief that was never going to move in a straight line from intense to nothing. Grief moves in spirals, not straight lines. It circles back, always at lower intensity than the original, always for shorter duration, but it returns. And knowing this changes everything about how it feels when it does. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Decide who you are in the grief before it arrives. Decide that you are someone who lets the returning grief visit, who gives it the time and the tears it needs, and who then returns to the life being built. That decision made in a calm moment becomes something real to hold on to when the wave comes back unexpectedly. The anniversaries are the most consistent returns. The first birthday without them, the first holiday, the specific ordinary day that marks something nobody else in the room knows about. These dates are coming. You can prepare for them, not to prevent the feeling, to meet it with stability rather than surprise. In the early period, every return feels almost as intense as the original. But across months and years, the returns change character. They become more like visits than floods. Each one teaches your system that it can carry more than it thought. The return always ends. Hold on to that when it is happening. This will pass. It always has. You have been on the other side of every wave so far. That record does not break. If you have been hit by a wave you did not see coming and survived it anyway, comment below, "Every wave passes. I survive." Truth 9. Finding yourself again is your job. No one can carry you back to yourself. The path exists. You have to walk it. This is the hardest truth in this video, and it comes with the most care. No one is coming to carry you back to yourself. The people who love you will do what they can. Some of them will do remarkable things. They will sit with you. They will show up when it costs them. What they cannot do is the internal work, the rebuilding of who you are without the person or the thing you lost. the rediscovery of the parts of yourself that the grief buried. That work lives in you, not as punishment, as honest description of where the work actually is. The path back exists. It is not one clear marked trail. It is made of small ones. One conversation with someone who can hold what you are carrying. One morning where you do one thing that belongs to your life rather than entirely to the grief. One small step toward the person the grief did not take. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The strength is not waiting on the other side of the grief. It is available inside it, right now. Because you are more capable than the grief suggests. Every day you got through was evidence of that. Even the days that felt impossible, you moved through them. You are still here. Finding yourself again does not mean finding who you were before the loss. That version was changed by the loss, and the change is permanent. Finding yourself again means finding the person you are after the loss. The one who carried this, the one who is still here, the one who has been through the worst thing and has not been permanently destroyed by it. That person is more than the grief allows you to see right now. Every small act of continuing was them. Every morning you got up was them. Every moment you chose something for yourself rather than entirely for the grief was them. The finding of yourself is further along than it feels. You have been doing it the entire time without knowing that is what you were doing. Start making the life bigger today. Not because the grief is finished, because the life is still here, because you are still here, and still being here after everything is the most important fact available. Everything else can be built from that one fact. One step, then another. That is the whole instruction. That is enough to begin. If you are taking one small step today back toward the life that is still waiting for you, comment below, "I am already finding my way back." 9 truths, all of them hard, all of them real. No timeline because grief works on its own schedule. You do not get over it, but you learn to carry it differently, and that is love continuing in the only form it has left. Everything you feel is allowed, and none of it is evidence against the love. The person you were before is gone, and the person arriving has more in them than you know. Staying in grief can become the last connection, and recognizing that is the door opening. People will fail you and reveal themselves, and the clarity that produces is worth having. Joy is not betrayal, and you are allowed to be fully alive again. The grief returns, and it always ends. And finding yourself again is your job, and the path is there, and you have been walking it longer than you realize. Grief was the price of something real, something that mattered deeply enough to leave this much weight behind. That kind of love deserves a person who finds their way back. Not for anyone else. For yourself. For the life that is still here waiting. You do not have to rush. You just have to keep pointing toward the life. One step, then another. That is enough to begin.